folks, and welcome to Zito. And John, you want to tell us a little bit about your background?
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be part of the AEDY team here. I bring with me a lot of experience in alternative education over the last 15, 16 years, working in various private organizations at juvenile facilities, as well as the Department of Corrections for
if you can hear me. Just making sure we're getting sound out there to everyone. Only 2 people. Anybody else can hear us? Thank you. While I'm talking here for a couple minutes, if you have any burning questions, things you want to talk about, if you could type them into the question box, and we'll respond to them after we go through the announcements and the updates. What I do want to do is remind everyone of the AEDY AEDY conference on August 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. I know we've announced it on every one of our sessions, but this is the last chance that we'll probably be able to talk to everyone as a group. So just a reminder and letting you know that the registration for that should be open within a week. I'm going to turn it over to Ryan. Ryan, do you have any updates you want to share?
No, and for those of you who logged on a little bit later, I had some problems with hearing us. This is the last webinar for the 15-16 school year, and then we'll start them up probably August, September, the beginning of next school year to reopen it up. We wanted to leave this one open to more of question and answer, but we had a few minor announcements. Another one that we are working on fervently right now is the end of year reporting for the 2014-15 school year. So we currently have about 100 schools that still have not completed their end of year reporting. If you're asking yourself what is end of year reporting, please shoot us an email after this and we can certainly help you out in getting that completed. We have other team members that are working on this, and we're working closely with our IT administrator at Cases to get it done. We really need to get this done as soon as possible because we cannot open the 15-16 data until the 14-15 has been closed. Just to provide another announcement as well, the team, we're still in the field this week. We're going to be in the field following the holiday and probably into the 1st or 2nd week of June. After that, we're going to try to get all of the other promises we've had done with regards to completing the AEDY guidelines, updating the BEC, completing the parents guide for our conference to hopefully have that to hand out at the conference. So we still have a lot of things that we're going to be working on this summer to try to get us all ready for the next school year.
I just got a message from Michelle Nutter, and she has indicated that conference registration will open sometime today or tomorrow. So that's
yeah, Michelle Nutter is our other team member. She's out in the field right now, out in New Jersey. So she's logging in right now to help us out as well. We're always out and about on the field, so hopefully the registration's today. If not, it's open tomorrow. If you have any questions or issues with that, they'll have all of the assistance that is needed for it to help you guys out. We do see some comments that people are saying that audio is in and out. If that's continuing to happen, let us know. Please make sure that you are using the appropriate speakers to be able to hear it. We've had people that have had issues.
Phone works much better.
Exactly. So if you are logging in through a computer and it's coming through intermittent, please call in. The number and PIN code is attached to the webinar for you to be able to call in. You'll be able to hear us much more clear. So at this point, we'd like to try to open it to some questions that you guys have from the field. If not, I can start discussing some of the things that we're starting to find in the field as well.
I have a question. Will you be sending out an email with a link for the conference registration? Yes, we will. There'll be an email and a pen link will go out as well.
So there was another question about the 15-16 end-of-year reporting. So as I said before, the 14-15 data has not all been collected from every LEA, so therefore we cannot open 15-16 until it's done. We've given everyone a due date of June 1st. Now there will come a point where it will automatically roll over and we will have to open the 15-16 data. However, the issue is anyone that doesn't have their 14-15 in it will get quite complicated from what our IT administrator cases is letting us know.
Okay, we're still getting messages that the sound is terrible. I wonder if we should hang up and try logging in again. Oh.
So as far as the due date for the 15-16 data, the due date still will be the July 31st. We can't change that due date because it's what's listed. However, we will understand that people need some time to work on it. However, anyone that will be missing that has not put in 15-16 data by our due date, we will be contacting everyone in August as opposed to this past year. So the new team, we became aware of the backlog and schools not completing data within the last month, and we're working on it now. But next year, we're going to be addressing it immediately after our due date and contacting anyone that's still behind. So we have a question. Can a special ed student be placed in an AEDY program if the parents refuse to sign the Norra without going to due process? So we've talked about special ed and AEDY a lot, and it's an extremely complicated situation, and it's supposed to be an extremely complicated situation. So outside of a unilateral placement, which would mean that the student committed an offense through IDEA regulations with a weapon on school property, drugs on school property, or a serious bodily injury, you have to follow all processes within special education from manifestation determination through the Norra. Just trying to scroll through some other questions.
Yeah, they seem to be.
What exactly is the end-of-year report? Good question. So the end-of-year report is all of the data that is collected for AEDY students. If you've ever even looked at the guidelines from 13-15, in the bottom end of the guidelines, you'll see a list of different questions. Or if you've had a site visit from the team, there's also those same questions. It is the number of, it does a lot of demographics with regards to grades, ethnicity, placement reasons, and it goes through all of this data and collects for every referral that you've sent throughout that year. And it breaks it down by the site that you send it to as well. Now, the good news is that we are working with a new IT program to create an online management system for our AEDY program. For many of you who know, Leader Services currently works with the Bureau of Special Education's program for their monitorings. We're hoping to have them help us and assist with the data collection so that it will help you collect the data throughout the year through utilizing the AEDY referral form. But currently, since we don't have that system in place and we're working on getting that completed, we still have to complete it through cases, and that means it needs to be entered manually into a spreadsheet. If you need some information with regards to the end-of-year reporting, we can put you through to our cases IT administrator, Gene Brialt. He does have a help desk number, so please shoot myself, Dana, an email. If you don't have our contact information, any of the archived webinars, we have our contact information attached to it. And just simply shoot us an email and we can get you hooked up with Gene and he can walk you through the paperwork on what you need to be doing. So I need a link for the 15-16 data. Is it a part of the PIMS report? So the 15-16 data has not been released as of yet. It is through the Safe Schools website. Anyone that was missing the 14-15 data, we actually sent an email out with Jean's contact information, also the website that you would be completing this information on. When we release the 15-16 data, a link will go out with all of that information for everyone to complete.
Pointing.
How are the on-site visits coming along? So we've successfully conducted more site visits since January. The new team came into place around November, and we got a couple site visits in, and then the holidays kicked in. And once we got our new process in place, January was when we really started implementing our new site visit process. And we've seen more programs in LEAs since January than AEDY has seen in the last 10 years. So it's going really well. Getting a lot of great feedback from the field, finding a lot of similar issues throughout the field, and we know that a lot of it's due to poor communication or incorrect communication that came out of the department throughout the years and the different administrators that were running it. But the good thing is that we have not shown up to a program and found anything that we can't fix. We like to work collaboratively with the programs, and so we'll give you an improvement plan that identifies specific issues, and we also provide the actual technical assistance related to how to fix it. So for any of you who've had experience before, you typically received an information such as, you weren't following due process with regards to Pennsylvania Code 12.8 for the informal hearing, and it would be a box next to it empty on you to figure out how to fix that. For us now, we would specifically identify which student wasn't provided sufficient notice or whatever the issue might be within that statute, and then we would provide the actual technical assistance and explain to you how to fix it. We say that this approach is collaborative because if you have another idea on how to fix it and it still meets the requirements for that specific issue, we're open to the notion that there are multiple ways to fix any specific issue we find during the site visits.
Back to the end of year reporting, as far as the due date for the 15-16 reporting, will that be July 31st?
Yeah, so the July 31st, from what I've gathered from our IT administrator, is an automated due date for the end of year reporting. We won't be able to change that. Again, if we're not releasing it until sometime in June, we do understand the turnaround time might be different. However, we're still going to be reaching out to everyone past that due date to make sure that you're working on it, that you are aware of how to complete it, and just providing that technical assistance. But we will have to make sure that we get this done before the beginning of the school year, because we would need to have the data in so that we can know who in the field needs assistance, and also for us with any right to know requests. As many of you know, the Education Law Center had filed a complaint, and all of that data was based on data that was collected through the end of year report. And if we don't have that data consistent, it can end up looking very skewed if anyone was to request a right to know and look at our data. So we want to make sure that it's accurate.
Do we have to complete an application to use AEDY applications for next year?
So LEAs complete their applications every 2 years and private providers every 3. The LEA application process with SharePoint, which we are still trying to work our way through with everyone, started last year. So that would have been good for 2 years. So we will not be reopening that until next year. The private providers all know their due dates with regards to when their due dates are every 3 years, and we work alongside with them in getting that completed.
Can requirements for data reports for this year be sent out so we can begin to prepare the data?
So the IT administrator at CASA says that if he opens the data right now, without having the 14-15 data in, that it would make the system extremely complicated and it would start to complicate the data. So he's trying to get it all in, and we're working with him to get everyone who hasn't completed it yet in so that we can release the 15-16. But as I said before, there is a point where that system will automatically roll over and push out the 15-16 data, and we will send a link out and emails letting people know when that's released.
Someone's asking about, are the blank forms up? I'm not quite sure what you're referring to. If you could provide more information, Jennifer, so that we could answer that question. Someone else is asking about PowerPoint slides. We have no handouts or slides, and we're not posting anything specific on the screen today. so there are no handouts or slides.
We are recording today's session just like the other ones, so we'll make sure that, we get that up within a couple days so that people can listen to it if they want to go back and check on some answers.
This is a question. We have students in an AEDY program who begin to experience school more successfully. When they transition back to the home school, they don't always access the supports in place, and they begin to falter. We'd like to begin developing a graduated transition program where students may spend a majority of the day in the AEDY, then attend for a partial schedule in the home school, gradually building back to a full schedule in the home school. Do you see any problem in this kind of transition plan?
So this is actually the best practice TA that we provide. We're doing our roadshow right now and doing an AEDY 101 interventions and transitions presentation, and the transition section discusses that very specifically. The kids who are experiencing more success in the AEDY program or have reluctance to return, we don't expect kids to transition where they end the AEDY on Friday and they're back in the high school on Monday. The idea of a transition is that it needs to be individually tailored to the student's needs, and it can be very gradual. For some students, gradual could be within a week. For other students, it might be 3 weeks. For some students, it might take 3 months. Or it might take multiple attempts at a plan because certain aspects of it don't go well. So we can see kids transition a class at a time, a day at a time. They could transition extracurriculars first. There's a lot of different ways that students can transition, but essentially what we want to do is we want to make a transition plan that ensures success and is strength-based. So you want to pick the courses, you want to pick the days of the week, you want to pick the teachers, you want to pick whatever is going to go well so that you can show the student that the skills they've learned in the AEDY program can be transitioned and used in other avenues.
The important thing you want to remember there is that the student does have to have met their behavior goals and be identified for transition.
Where is that? Sorry.
It went up. Hold on.
Okay. So,
go ahead.
What are the regulations, laws with an AEDY program being in the same building as a non-AEDY? Essentially, with the definition of disruptive student and their need to be removed from the regular education setting is that they would not have access to or commingle with non-AEDY students. There's no regulation that says that it can't be in the same school building as long as you have, processes in place to ensure that they're not crossing over with non-AEDY students, whether that be transitions from class to class or even being in the same class, such as gym or even lunch or anything like that. So there are many in-houses that actually run the program within their high school, which does make, as we discussed before, the transitions, it makes those transitions a lot easier because you're talking about transitioning a kid down the hallway maybe rather than across town.
If the board expels a student and sends students to AEDY for a specific amount of time, do you do the formal periodic review at 90 days?
So formal periodic reviews, as far as Pennsylvania statute 1901 through 1906, states that they need to occur at minimum once per semester. And so regardless of how a student's expulsion reads, the way that the statute is written is very clear-cut and black and white that it has to be once a semester. Now, if a student is expelled for a year, they do a drug offense and your policy within your school is a 1-year expulsion. We've worked with the programs and telling them that we want to have it so that one of their behavioral goals is that they need to meet the requirements of their expulsion. So they'll have their other goals related to the actual offense, which is bringing controlled substances onto school property and maybe some of the decision making that goes along with that. So you're still going to be reviewing their academic progress, still reviewing their attendance, and even still reviewing their behavioral goals. And even if they meet all of them except for the expulsion, that would make it a situation where you wouldn't need, the statute wouldn't say that you would have to start transitioning them because they'd still have one goal that they have not met.
If a district has not been receiving the emails, who do we contact to start receiving email? Contact me, DKLOUS as in Sam, ER at PA.gov. We currently are using the contact information from SharePoint, but if that's not up to date, that could be the reason you wouldn't receive the emails. So just contact me with who you want to be receiving emails, and I'll add it to like an auxiliary list that we tack on at the end of the listserv.
So someone made a mention that districts need more ideas for interventions once transition has occurred. As far as a session at the conference, we're going to have a lot of different sessions related to other resources that are available. And if you can make it to one of our regional trainings, there's an entire section that I go through with regards to community interventions. My background is about 10 years in community mental health and social work, so that is definitely my expertise that I bring to the table with regards to transition planning, discharge planning, and creating a slew of resources with community agencies. And sorry if we miss anyone's question. They're rolling pretty quick, so we're going to try to get through as many as we possibly can.
And yeah, and they're popping in no random order, so I have to keep going up and down.
Okay. The end of year reporting forms have not been changed at all, with it just being this late in the game and us planning on moving forward with Leader to do it. There's really no point in us spending the time to change it right now when we're going to change it again. We have changed it with regards to when we do site visits, so rather than asking for percentages and for you guys to do calculations, we will just be asking for raw numbers, and we will do the calculations. So the end of year reporting data has not changed. There was a question with regards to finding out what needs to be collected so you can start gathering it now. It's the same as it was the year before. So you should have the forms that you did for your 14-15. Simply collect that same data, and then once it's released, you can post it.
So I think they're asking for a template to complete that they can prepare ahead of time.
Yeah, I would use the same template that was sent to you for the 14-15 data. And there was a comment that, with regards to the transition, that prior communication with that student was either 100% in or 100% out. And we just know that that's not going to be, it's more of a reactive approach, and you're going to end up with a lot of returned referrals and students returning within a couple weeks. The idea of transitioning students back in once they've met their behavioral goals, it alleviates the issues of commingling, because at this point those students have met their goals and have earned their ability to return to their regular education setting. We just need to understand the realistic aspect that every other facet of youth services does a transition. When you have kids coming out of RTF and CRO host them, they do therapeutic leaves. We have to find out what's going to work and what's not going to work before we have kids fully transition. Now, this doesn't say that there are not kids that can just fully transition. For your students that have never been in trouble before and accidentally, forget a pocket knife, in their jeans and bring it to school, never had any troubles before, that could be a student that can end on Friday and go back to the high school on Monday, because you probably don't have all of the other issues going on and concerns with regards to their transition.
What if a parent wants their student in an AEDY program and they haven't committed an infraction that would put them there?
So AEDY is not voluntary because of the way that the statute is written. So in order to be considered for AEDY placement, you have to meet one of the 7 criteria to a marked degree, and then you have to go through that process of providing the administrative interventions, referral to school counselors, SAP, then due process. So there's actual statute that mandates it. It would be no different than a question of asking, could a parent voluntarily send their kid to a corrections ed setting? And the answer would be no, because they needed to be adjudicated and a decision would need to be made by a judge. This is a similar process in that there's something specific in statute as to how a student would get in there. My question would always return to the parent of what they're looking for from that. And if it's a smaller classroom setting or something along those lines, there's some aspect of AEDY that appeals to that parent. That's what the school needs to start looking at, the other resources that they have, and determine maybe if one of their private academic settings would be more appropriate for that student, but AEDY would not be, it would be an illegal placement.
What if a student does not meet the discharge or the transition criteria?
So if a student has not met their behavioral goals, then they would be considered to remain in placement in the AEDY program. For kids with considerably long lengths of stay, we know that in every other facet of human services, the team should start considering a change or alter of the approach or the treatment plan that is being provided to the students, because obviously whatever interventions or issues that are going on are not being addressed through the current plan. So I would suggest the team getting together, tweaking the plan, maybe providing some additional support to help to address that behavior.
The Safe Schools reporting tool says LEAs are not permitted to make user accounts for their contracted private providers. How are we supposed to get the AEDY staff to enter data for each student? Can this policy be changed?
So end-of-year reporting is actually an LEA thing as far as the way that statute and guidelines is written, and private providers are not considered schools. They're only approved to run a program. So we couldn't change that because they're not considered an LEA. Now, as far as going forward with leader services, like we said, we're hoping that the AEDY referral form will actually drive data so that you guys won't need to collect it. So any policy changes or issues with our current end-of-year reporting, we're hoping that this would be one of the last years that we would really be doing it.
What if a student qualifies to go back, transition, but the parents want him to stay?
So this is kind of the same thing that we talked about before with can a parent request them to go in? This is the same approach. A parent can't request a student to stay. And we do understand that this might be the first time ever the parent even got a note home from school that they're doing well, their grades are up. We know that a lot of kids show, maybe sometimes for the first time, success in the education setting, and so the parents are reluctant to have them return. This is where that small baby step transition plan would be ideal, because we need to show the student, the parent, everyone on the team that those students' successes and skills are not because of the AEDY program at that point, but because they've developed skills, and we need to show them that they can use them in other facets. One of the other things we always talk about with these situations is an AEDY setting, and having them stay is not going to prepare these kids for the workforce or prepare them for higher education, because they're not going to have that specific situation where everyone's going to say, okay, you can stay. We need to prepare them for the workforce. We need to prepare them for higher education. And so the kid needs to be pushed at this point now that they've developed those skills. So we do the baby step transition. Sometimes it's the step up, step down where it's not working well. So we take a step back, try a new transition plan. And then there are those students that maybe transitioning back to the high school is not what we need to consider. Maybe it's transitioning to a private academic program that mimics some of the aspects of it that the parent, like I said before, what the parent's looking for: small classroom setting, stronger teacher-to-student ratio, additional supports and interventions. There are a lot of private academic schools that provide something along those lines, but it's not a forced placement, it's not a discipline-based placement. So that's what we would consider transitioning students that maybe don't fit the model of returning to the regular education setting.
The conference is encouraged for LEAs, not just private providers, correct? That is correct. And it's not just for the folks that are doing the paperwork to send kids to AEDY. It's for counselors, anyone that would administer those interventions within the LEA. There's no limit to the number of folks that can attend from an LEA.
Mm-hmm. Some of our workshops and trainings and keynotes that we're providing at this conference could even relate to the teachers at the main school, where they're providing classroom management skills and interventions before we even get to the point of AEDY. Our goal with all of the training and TA that we're providing is not just to help people how to operate and run an AEDY, but how to prevent students from getting to that point. It's the idea of truly working ourselves out of a job. And so it's open to parents if they want to come. We have no limitations on people that want to come to this. So it's LEAs, community members, private providers, everyone.
Is there a specific number of AEDY students allowed to be in a classroom?
So best practice is a 10-to-1 ratio. When we talk about this, you have to take into consideration that these are students that could not be managed in the regular education classroom. And so we're sticking, 10 or 15, or if you stick 20 AEDY students that could not be managed at their regular school and you're sticking them in one classroom, our encouragement is that you have a 10-to-1 ratio of staff to student, because it becomes a difficult thing to manage, and we want the teachers to be able to teach even in the AEDY settings. So having that smaller classroom allows them to, conduct their classroom management skills, but also still teach these students and keep them, making progress to graduate.
What about special education numbers? Is there a specific regulation on the number of special ed students in an AEDY program?
So what we look at, and this is part of one of the presentations we do, and one of the things that we're addressing from the Education Law Center complaint is disproportionality. And disproportionality is an overrepresentation of any specific target population. And so we'll look at the percentage of students in your LEA and compare it to the percentage of students in your AEDY program based on whatever we're looking at. So if it's special ed and there's 20% special ed students in the district, we're going to expect those numbers to be pretty close there too with special education students in the AEDY program. Now, we do understand that with regards to unilateral placements or the big three for regular ed students, that those are not discretionary placements. They're the weapons, drugs, and violent or threatening behavior for special ed at serious bodily injury. We're trying to work with our team to remove that data when we're looking at it. So we would look at the discretionary placements, which would be 1, 5, 6, and 7. And if there's an exponentially higher or a disproportionate representation of a population, that would be something that we would want to work with the LEA on. So there's times we've gone into programs where, like I said, there's 20% special ed in the district and there's 80% in the AEDY, and that would be considered a disproportionate representation. We also see these kinds of numbers, and even looking at the ELC complaint, but also nationally that students, African American students, Latino students, specifically male African American Latinos, have much higher expulsion and suspension rates, and therefore end up in AEDY settings a lot more than that. So we have some trainings from different members of the community and organizations at our conference. We also have a relationship with Dr. Nicole Hollins from Patan, who is going out and providing training with regards to these aspects. And our keynote, Dr. Tyrone Howard, is actually going to be doing a presentation on why race and culture matter. So a big portion of our conference, our presentations, our trainings are geared towards kind of addressing these issues. It's not to say that there's a specific number, but you want to make sure that there's an appropriate representation of each group in your AEDYs compared to your LEA.
Where's the conference in August? The conference is at the Harrisburg Hilton in downtown Harrisburg. There's no conference registration fee. The only thing you would be responsible for is your overnights or travel to get to the conference. I'm also continuing to see questions regarding some kind of a graphic organizer for the new data, and also realizing that new programs would not have previous data, so they wouldn't know what needs to be collected. So we hear you. We're going to look into that and see what we can get out to folks moving forward for the next data collection of the 15-16 data.
Now, Michelle's commenting from the field, and just to let you guys know that if you did not have a program during the 14-15 school year, we understand that you would not have data for that. And if you did not send any kids in 14-15, say you had a program and you never sent any kids, we do need a letter on LEA letterhead from your superintendent stating that you had 0 placements at such and such program for the 14-15 school year, so that we can pull your school off the data requirement for that year.
If a referral form is received from a district that cites the IEP for many of the interventions, is this adequate if it's attached?
If it's attached, yes. We do need to make sure that they do meet the same requirements. There's a lot of interventions that are provided in special education that don't align with administrative interventions or referral to a school counselor, and of course the SAP team. So you have to make sure that if they are in relation to it, and I would usually cite to it because an IEP is a pretty comprehensive document. So if you're citing to a specific intervention in that IEP, I would say, please see attached page such and such, section such and such, so that it's easy for us to relate to it and see what you're talking about, because if we can't find it, we can't give credit for it.
At the conference or anywhere else, is there an example or sample of an AEDY student file or the file checklist?
I do have an AEDY file management tool that you can use that breaks it down by sections, and it identifies what we're looking for in that. You can also look at one of our previous webinars, which is where we discussed the new AEDY referral form. You'll hear everything that we're actually looking at when we look at a file and when we're looking at a file review, and listen to the different sections that we're doing.
Do all kids need to go through a transition plan?
As I said before, there are some kids that might not need a transition plan where they can stop one day and start the next. It's definitely every situation with this is case by case depending on what that student needs. And like I said, a student who's never had issues before, doesn't have any apprehensions going forward, and the team agrees that they could transition the next day, there'd be no reason for them to have to have a transition plan that was spread over time.
Long length of stay and not met goals might be a child find issue.
Absolutely. So when you have a long length of stay and things aren't working, that could definitely be a child find issue. There's a lot of different things that you need to be looking at when you're looking at a long length of stay. At that point, the interventions and everything that's provided in the program is not working. So definitely it would be a situation where you might want to consider a child find.
Ryan, you explained the legal statute piece of AEDY placement so well. I would love to see some of this on a website down the road when you have time. And I must agree with you, to the person that that typed this in. Ryan does do a fantastic job, not only with the legal and statute piece, but with the interventions piece. He definitely has a gift.
That's recorded. So we do plan to really beef up our website. We want to have our guidelines, our website, and everything to be a really strong resource for everyone, so that our goal is that you could go on our website, and between our guidelines, the best practice guide, everything, you could literally bounce around the website and get a strong notion of an AEDY and how it needs to what you need to do to run it. So we really want to make sure that we provide that. In our summer, I know I keep being optimistic. I'm definitely a glass half full, and I'm sometimes, Dana and Michelle bring me back down to earth, but I have a lot of hopes for the summer and what we can do in providing everything to you guys, while also planning the conference and planning next year. So hopefully, as we go along, that website's definitely going to get stronger.
Can a district refer a student to a private AEDY program when they return from a court placement after a meeting with the parent and all parties agree it is the best placement?
So we discussed this in our training too, with regards to kids returning from JPO placement or returning from any placement. If it's RTF, they're moving in from another school district, any kid coming in, the answer is if then maybe, is what I always say. And the if then maybe is because what we need to do is every student, regardless, even if they're coming out of court placement, it has a right to due process through Pennsylvania Code 12.8, and also constitutionally they have a right to due process. So what you'd want to do is conduct an informal hearing, and since you guys are meeting anyway, provide notification to the team that the meeting that we're having is going to be an informal hearing, and at that point you want to gather information based on their education placement they were previously in. So if they're in a JPO placement, they're receiving education, and there'll be records of the student's behavior in that education placement. If they were in RTF, they're receiving education, and we'll have records, and so forth. And what you want to do is first ask yourself, does the behaviors that we gathered from that education placement meet one of the 7 criteria for AEDY placement? If the answer is no, the conversation's done, we can't consider AEDY. If the answer is yes, and you can document to a marked degree that they meet one of the 7 criteria for placement, then you can consider AEDY placement. And we do say this with a caveat, because we know that in the past, you were told you could place anyone coming out of placement. Then you were told you couldn't place anyone. Now it's definitely that if, then maybe. And what I want people to make sure is that when you read those 7 criteria, you recognize that it says on school property or during school activities. So if a kid was arrested for robbing a store at gunpoint in town, that could not be a reason because a possession of a weapon, because it was not on school property or during a school activity. Or if they were dealing drugs and it was not on school property or during a school activity, and they were placed in a JPO placement, that could not be a reason to send them to AEDY. Once you have done that part, and then you've determined they meet one of the 7, you have to see and make sure they documented that they've received all 3 interventions. So they would have had to receive the administrative intervention, the referral to school counselor, and SAP. The first 2 might be easier to document because those programs are going to have weekly meetings and interventions. They're going to be meeting with a counselor in the program, but the SAP one is going to be the hardest one to document. And if it's not there, we have to provide it. If you're in a situation where you're nervous about it, I get a lot of administrators that say, oh my God, I know how this is going to go, What we tell them is if you can't place a student in AEDY based on going through that process, then what you need to do is front load all the interventions. Tell them at that informal hearing, listen, you know, you had struggled before in your previous time here, you're just getting back from JPO placement, you're going to come back into the high school, but we're going to give you some interventions to start. And we're going to have weekly meetings, which means you've covered your administrative intervention. I'm going to have you check in with the school counselor every morning before you go in. There's your counselor intervention, and we're going to have the staff team get involved with you. And so therefore, you've provided all 3 levels of intervention before they first walk in the door. So if that first 2 weeks doesn't go well, now you can consider AEDY placement.
I need to redact something that Ryan said. He, as far as parents are not eligible for the conference, to our knowledge. If something changes with that, we'll include it with the announcement. So we just want to take that off the table for now. How does an LEA add an additional AEDY provider for the 16-17 school year? Do they access the previous application or create a new one? It goes on the previous application, and if your application has already been submitted, if you send me an email, dklouser@pa.gov, I'll return the application to you in order for you to add the provider, and then you can just, if you've taken one off and added one, there's no additional charge, but if you're adding a new one, you would need to forward then a check for $400. Where do we go to register for the August conference? That information has not gone out yet. We expect it to go out today or tomorrow.
If a student with a itinerant level of emotional behavioral support under special education goes into an AEDY program with behavioral counseling in a group and individual behavioral plans as required by the program, would they still need the related services or positive behavioral support plan in the IEP? So any special education student going to any program, regardless of AEDY or not, would need to be provided every level of their IEP. And one of the things that I know that Bob Moore, a special ed advisor, looks at is if the IEP was revised to make the student have less services going into the AEDY on the review. We want to make sure that whatever the student was required to receive prior to going to the AEDY placement, they're going to be receiving afterwards.
Is there an explanation or list of the 7 criteria? Yes, that information is on the AEDY referral form. It's also in statute and code. Correct, Ryan?
Yes. So the 7 criteria for placement are based in statutes 1901 through 1900C. That link is on the current website if you go to the bottom, and you'll be able to look at the 7 reasons for placement. Please make sure that you're reviewing every aspect of that, making sure that it's on school property, making sure that it's in relation to the statute. We talk about in our trainings, even with regards to the controlled substance, it cites the federal statute for the 5 subject areas of what considers a controlled substance. Therefore, some of your policies at the school might not be in line. If your drug policy includes tobacco products or e-cigarettes, it's not that you couldn't place the kid, but you couldn't place them for controlled substance on school property. You'd have to place them for number 6, conduct that would merit expulsion, suspension or expulsion. The same thing goes for a weapon. That's cited to the PA Crimes Code. If the weapon doesn't meet the PA Crimes Code definition of a weapon, but your policy says it is, it's not that you can't place them. You just can't place them for the reasons of a weapon. It would need to be for conduct that merits suspension or expulsion.
Your previous answer about students committing crimes off school property and then being placed in an AEDY. What process is left for me when the school board and superintendent force the placement?
So, I mean, the long and short of it is that it's an illegal placement, and that based on Pennsylvania school code, Pennsylvania statute, the superintendent does not have the authority to force a placement into AEDY. I mean, simplistically, if you contact us, we will definitely address the issue, but we do it in a very democratic way. We really do work collaboratively with schools, even when we find things. Everything can be fixed, everything can be addressed. What the board needs to realize and the superintendent needs to realize is that that student's due process rights were violated, and that if they were to contact an attorney, and we know many of them who make 6-7-figure incomes every year in filing lawsuits just like this one against school districts throughout the state, whether it's through special ed or with due process issues. So that wouldn't be a placement. Please contact us. We're also going to find it during the site visit, so we always tell people it's better to call us ahead of time than when we're there and finding it ourselves. Just reach out to us and ask us if we feel a placement has met the requirements, and we'll take a look at it for you.
Are there any differences for students ages 18 to 21? Are there specific facilities for this group?
So with regards to special ed students or kids that are overage under credit, I mean, there are some aspects of AEDY where they could end up being 18, 19 years old in an AEDY placement, but there are some aspects where they can't. You have to recognize that for truancy, the compulsory age for attendance after they've turned 17, they cannot be placed for truancy. So, but if a kid were to be 19 years old, overage, under credit in your high school and brings a weapon to school, you do have the legal right to consider placement at that point. There are a lot of other specific areas. I mean, for the most part, most of you kids that are 20, I mean, if you have kids 20, 21 years old, these are going to be special education students, and you need to look at the manifestation determination and determine, was this a result of their disability or the failure of the LEA to implement that IEP? And if it was, then we need to consider rewriting the IEP, or consider other placements that would best meet their needs.
Someone's asked me to repeat my email address. It is D as in dog, KLOUS as in Sam, ER @pa.gov.
Please also, if you click on any of our previous webinars on the website, they're archived, and in that archive is a list of all of our contact information. So please log into there. You'll be able to get our emails and phone numbers.
Wouldn't it also make sense that if an IEP student is being referred to an AEDY placement, that the services listed in the IEP aren't working, and there would be a need to revise the IEP with different services?
Just give me a second to read this. Being referred to an AEDY placement, but aren't working, and there would need to be a revised IEP with different services. So I mean, it would really depend if the behavior was a manifestation of their disability or a failure of the LEA to implement. I mean, obviously, we should always be reviewing a student's IEP regardless of their setting and determining if the current services meet their needs. But if you have a student that is requiring a certain level of services through an IEP and special education, the expectation is that regardless of placement, they're still going to have those needs. And so their needs are not going to change because they're put into another placement. Now, it could mean that if they were required to get counseling every week, that it could be met by the AEDY program, but that need doesn't go away. It just changes who's providing it.
Okay, we've gone through all the questions. Couple comments. I just want to ask and make sure that how are these webinars working for you? Are we using the best means of communicating with you? So if you have a second and can comment to that question. And then also a reminder about the regional trainings that we are doing around the state. We've done 4 so far. We'll be doing one in King of Prussia, a morning and afternoon session in King of Prussia tomorrow. We're at the Allegheny IU next Thursday for a morning and afternoon session. And then in the fall, we hope to pick up and cover the other areas of the state that we haven't hit so far. Just a reminder to be on the lookout for those dates and pen links announcing those sessions. Again, a reminder about the conference, August 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Look for information about it to go out today or tomorrow. And give it a second here. I don't see any more questions. I think we will wrap it up.
Yeah, and if come next week you haven't received anything on the conference and you feel like it was released, or if you haven't been receiving the emails that we're talking about, please go on one of the previous webinars, grab our contact information to reach out to us.
I do see a comment about the short notice on the webinars. I believe if you go to the PDE website, you will see that the dates have already been determined for the webinars for the remainder of the year, and they are listed there. I also see a question about would there be a special rate at the Hilton for the conference, and yes, there will be a special conference rate at the Hilton.
I did see one comment that we just need to get some quicker notice with regards to the webinars. A lot of our previous webinars, it was a new thing that we were setting up these last couple months. We've been trying to move pretty quick with everything. Our goal this summer is to try to plot out our next year a little bit more effectively since we have our team established and we have some of our processes. But the webinar was literally something that came out of a meeting with our idea of getting together and reaching out to everyone. So that's why you know, there was short notice on some of them. And next year we're hoping to get possibly a calendar out so that you guys have an idea of when they are throughout the year.
Right, and that is up already.
Yeah.
That there is a calendar up there already. It does not have, we don't have the dates for those regional trainings pinned down yet for the fall, but the webinar dates are on there.
Yep.
Well, thank you, everyone, and if we're not going to see you on a site visit or at a regional training in the next couple weeks, I hope to see everyone in August at the conference here in Harrisburg. Have a great summer.
Thanks, everyone.